Alright, so, this is going to be a bit of an unscripted video, reviewing the new Steam controller by Hori. I was going to do, like, another, fairly scripted review, kind of like the last one, but, this thing's honestly not worth the effort. But it is worth warning you about. So, let's get into that. So, this is basically the newest Steam controller that you can get on the market until the Steam Controller 2 releases. We've been affectionately been calling it the Steam Controller 1.5 because it's somewhere between the original Steam controller and whatever the new Steam controller is that Valve will release. Realistically, this is more like the Steam Controller 0.5. It feels like a prototype. But on paper, in concept, this thing sounds pretty freaking good. So, it doesn't have trackpads like the actual Steam controller does. It does have touch sensors underneath these thumb caps here. And these know when your thumb is actually touching the stick. By default, when your thumb is on the stick, it's a toggle for a gyroscope. And you guys know where I stand on gyro. I think that it's a very important feature to have on controllers, especially in the modern age where aim assist has gotten so disgustingly aggressive that it's genuinely unfair. If you had a gyroscope in your controller and could aim basically like a mouse, that really helps bridge the gap between controllers and actual mice, to the point where you really don't need aim assist to be a thing. Aim assist existing is really only a crutch for controllers that refuse to adopt it. But the gyro has to be good. And with this thing's primary function being gyro, you'd expect that. Well, we'll get into that in a moment. We'll talk about what drew me to this controller initially. Steam has been a pain in the butt to get certain controllers working with recently. Ever since they did, like, the whole overhaul of Big Picture and all these updates to make things compatible with the Steam Deck, we lost a lot of legacy compatibility with older controllers. Not until this year, or I guess late last year actually, it's 2025, not until recently have I been able to even use the DualShock 4 again with its intended features because of how horrible Steam support has been for controllers. And God forbid you want to use anything niche like this. Sometimes it could be something super basic and it just, for some reason, won't let you bind left on the D-pad. But then you back out of it and it can see it. But when you're pressing it, nothing happens. When you're trying to bind it, I don't know what's going on. Same thing happens with Start. A lot of controllers I have this issue. The idea of a officially licensed Steam controller from Hori that has built-in support for all of its extra buttons and paddles and touch sensors, lots of bindings, lots of extra menu buttons, it sounds like a good idea. You know, like something that I would absolutely want, especially in the whole Steam ecosystem of half of my controllers are basically unusable now because Valve can't get their shit together. So something designed specifically for the new Steam, oh, that sounds great. And honestly, it works perfectly. Every single button that's on this controller is something that it identifies and can be rebound. It has its own custom UI elements and everything, and I've never had an issue rebinding anything to this controller. So that aspect of it, at least, it's perfectly fine. Everything works. That is the end of my compliments for this controller. I understand that the original Steam controller has some pretty big shoes to fill. This thing is clumsy and awkward, and everything just feels wrong. But this thing, beyond the Wii U gamepad, has had the most accurate gyro. Using the touchpads for a mouse-like aim is actually really freaking good. The face buttons feel good, and having the bindable paddles on the back that can rebind to anything, including different menu actions in games or even stuff outside of Steam because you can bind it to actions your computer can do. Oh, it's limitless. This thing is pretty cool, and I did not expect this to be as good. Can you turn off? Wow, you're almost as bad as PlayStation about that. Anyway, I was not expecting this to be as good as the original Steam controller. So I want you guys to know that I'm not going in expecting miracles here. What I was expecting was that this would be a perfect replacement for something I used to use to replace the Steam controller for comfort's sake, the DualShock 4. This thing is almost perfect. It has its own little touchpad, but its tracking is abysmal compared to this. But you can rebind it to 2 extra buttons to replace the back paddles here. And it's got a much more comfortable and traditional layout. Everything just feels so much better to press. The analog triggers have more travel, although they don't click in. They don't have that, like, analog and then digital click, like the Steam controller has. But generally, it's fine. Problem is, the potentiometers in this thing are garbage. Sony cannot make a stick to save their life, and I use controllers a lot and wear them out. And these things are also a nightmare to service. Did you know that there's like 7 different versions of this controller? Yeah, me either, until I had to open this up and realized, why doesn't this match at all to the teardown instructions? Anyway, this thing could have been perfect, if not for its build quality. It's got good features, it's got a great comfort, a great layout. It's just the reliability. The battery sucks, the sticks are abysmal. Imagine something like this with a comfortable layout, the same features, if not more. You know, we've got the touchpads kind of here. Same thing with that, right? Left and right. This time it actually has real paddles, and we've got analog triggers, which is important because the reason I'm using the DualShock 4 as a replacement for the Steam controller and not, well, anything else is we get to a problem. See, now usually it would be pretty easy to get like a controller that has a dang good gyroscope, but there's 2 issues that arise with that, and it's related to having analog triggers, which isn't always important, but if you're playing something like GTA or any kind of like shooter where, you know, you want to be able to like actually have gyro aim, but analog control for, you know, a car, kind of hard to not wheel slip when it's either all or nothing. So it either doesn't have it at all, or it's a problem like this, where you can have analog triggers or gyro. See, there's different profiles on this by holding start and one of the face buttons. The only 2 we'll worry about is Y and X. Y is going to be your switch input, which lets you have a gyroscope, but these squishy triggers now count as a digital input, so any amount of pull is all the way. Versus, basically an Xbox One mode, where you lose the gyroscope, but you get the analog triggers. And it's a pain in the butt to toggle between them because they're identified as 2 different controllers, and a lot of games don't let you hot swap between them. This is where PlayStation kind of became the only option. They have a good thing going here, being the only guys on the market to have a decent gyroscope and analog triggers. Unless, somehow, with a major platform like Steam, we could have custom software that allows both a gyroscope and analog triggers. Yes? And that's exactly what this is, just like the original Steam controller. This is something designed to work with Steam specifically. It doesn't connect to like other consoles that I know of. I think there's an Xbox 360 mode if you plug it in through USB, but I don't think that'll work on an actual 360. At any rate, this is designed solely for PC gaming on Steam specifically. Or if you want to maybe launch Epic Games through the Steam launcher and use the bindings there, that could work. Problem is, well, let's talk about the comfort of this controller compared to what I'm actually comparing it to, the DualShock 4. It's not as comfortable to hold. I'm never a fan of lopsided sticks, but that's not going to dock any points on me on its own. I mean, one of my favorite controllers is the GameCube controller, but these lopsided sticks already feel like way more comfortable, and you'd think this would be okay because of like, you know, they're closer together. You don't even have to move your thumbs as far. The problem is this stick is so freaking tall. It's kind of weird to do this like up and to the side motion. I think you can see my tendon of my thumb there kind of tensing up. I don't like lopsided controllers for this reason. There's a reason the C-stick on the GameCube controller is just this tiny little flattened nub, and this whole thing is like elevated. I really can't dock that here. It's just my preference to not have that. I'd rather have the 2 sticks on the top and the D-pad and buttons on the bottom like the Wii U Pro controller does it, especially for like, you know, if this is going to be primarily for gyro and you're going to be using the sticks most of the time, and then like, you know, the paddles for your important actions. why not just have both the sticks on the top and have it be comfortable? That aside, how is the controller on its own? Well, the sticks, they feel pretty freaking smooth in these rings here, which are apparently replaceable. I've not been able to verify that because attempting to open up this controller, I felt like I was going to snap it. There is something holding on to it in here. It's not any hidden screws or anything. I think there's adhesive on the thing that holds the battery in place, and I don't want to risk breaking it. It's not really repairable. It's kind of a huge pain in the butt to disassemble this. Somehow actually worse than this, which I have done servicing on before and was able to get in there. And this thing needs a plastic sprying tool. Or at least it used to until I accidentally broke the tabs. So serviceability, it's already worse than this. Comfort, it's not as good. The D-pad is fine. That's really all I can say. Like, it feels like a cheap third-party D-pad, but it doesn't feel like a bad D-pad. I'd actually say that the DualShock 4 has a much better D-pad. It's way better feeling and much snappier without being tactile. I actually like short press membrane D-pads because everything that does like a hard click is going to mess up the gyro. I do like that this is soft. All of these are membrane, all the important ones. Except for these down here, which, I mean, if you're reaching your thumbs down here, you're probably not using the gyro at the moment anyway. It's just extra bindings. Even the paddles on the back, these are membrane. Whereas these, they're clicky. So it could have actually been an improvement here. Not to mention that this is kind of clicky too. You don't want to jitter your gyro aim. You'll have to mess with settings in Steam to compensate for that. So it's fine. The D-pad's fine. The buttons, these are awful. Really small, kind of a rough material, like I described with the buttons on this 64 controller, but they're spaced apart in a way that, like, I can't really rock my thumb over it. Like, my thumb naturally fits in between them, and it's just so unsatisfying. I prefer the GameCube layout. If I want to rock my thumb over buttons, it's perfect. A is never out of reach, and it's like the primary thing. But it doesn't have to be like that. The PlayStation controller, its buttons are super flat with the controller and super easy to like rapidly hit between them. That's fine. That's good. Sort of the same thing going here. It's a little more spaced apart, but, you know, flat buttons, easy to like rock your thumb over and hit which ones you need, right? Yeah, not this. Look at that, they're even kind of like slanted on the controller. The B button is trying to escape. It doesn't want to be here. Off the side of the controller here. I'd actually prefer if these buttons were glossy and small, like the 64 controller. Actually, the real 64 controller. Like this. These are pretty tiny, but the spacing's good, and it's easy to rock between them. They're a little slanted too, actually, aren't they? I guess it just comes down to just straight up a better design on the 64 controller. Lord, you know we're in for it when I'm saying the 64 controller has a better design. So let's get into the rest of the features. These are nice. Little M1 and M2 buttons, extra bindable buttons down there that you can put anything you want on it. For some reason, they bind to A and X by default. I thought since it says M1 and M2, this would have been mouse 1 and mouse 2 clicks. You know, in case like it's one of those games that sort of supports a controller, but you need to navigate the menu with a mouse. And like, you know, this could be cool. You could make it so that maybe when you like double tap the touchpad, it enables this as a mouse. And then you can left click, right click. You can do that. By default, it's bound to A and X, and the triggers are the mouse clicks, unless you get into a game. That's odd. You can change that. These are fine. Whatever. The clickable sticks, they're a little rough. I'd probably prefer binding those to the paddles. Unfortunately, there's only two, just like the original Steam controller. So if you're already binding this to stuff, that could be an issue. The extra options menu is nice. I've never seen a controller able to actually pull up the extra options from Steam, so that's kind of cool. Shoulder buttons feel okay. Triggers. This is weird. They have a toggle switch back here that allows you to switch between an analog response curve and a digital one. And initially, I'm like, why wouldn't you just leave it on analog? Because look at this. That is the maximum travel. That's it. And you see how it's kind of like an instant motion? Whereas the Steam controller, was a nice, smooth analog motion and then clicks in, just like the original GameCube controller. Nice, smooth analog motion and clicks in. This clicks, and then you squeeze it. I'm serious, look. It clicks first. You don't want to drive with this. It sounds like it'd be helpful for like, shooters where you have to get into vehicles. It's not. You like immediately throttle it like 70% of the way, and then there's a little bit of control at the upper end. But like, you're not shifting this in low gear, I'll tell you that. I kind of find that fascinating because like, I've never seen a controller take this approach to it. Now, because it clicks in like that, and it's so rapid fire, I thought, what's the point of this toggle on the back? Well, it kind of doesn't listen to your input until you squeeze it, if you are trying to use it like analog. If you give it a little touch here, it's delayed. It doesn't actually register until it's all the way pressed down into that like analog zone. So yeah, the toggle switch on the back, absolutely necessary for, wanting to rapid fire it so that any amount of input is immediately registered. I don't know why they don't just have those little like slides where you can put stoppers on analog triggers. That would be so much better. But all of this won't matter anyway, because of two things that I've been saving for last, and these are the worst offenders. Actually using the joysticks and the gyroscope. Let's start with the joysticks, because the gyroscope is going to shock you. This little touch sensor here is kind of useless because as your thumb presses this, your thumb is kind of like naturally, let me see if I can get the focus on that. Your thumb is like naturally going to press it like this when you press it all the way because of how far it goes. Because this is like concave, your thumb naturally lifts off of it. So you'll be like using the gyro, and then like when you do like a quick aim and try to move your camera with it to like, do the Splatoon thing of turn faster. Nope, sorry, your thumb's off of it. So I just turn these touch pads off. And thankfully, these touch pads are kind of like those touch lamps where it does need to be your thumb to register it. So you absolutely can put stick caps on it and it's not gonna like end up holding down the button. That's good. And that's actually kind of a requirement because you will need stick caps on this. Only half an hour and my thumb was numb and turning like purple in a perfect little line. Because this material on the side, I feel like I owe that controller an apology because this is actually sandpaper. It is such a hard material and it's got all these little grit pellets that just dig into your thumb. It's seriously like rocking on a thin margin around this ring on sandpaper, scraping against your thumb as you move it around. Like literally just that motion felt horrible. So that's why I had stick caps on this thing, because it was absolutely unbearable to use this controller without it. And you know what the problem with putting a stick cap on this is, aside from trying to find some that'll even fit? Joy-Con stick caps actually fit. Well, third-party Joy-Con stick caps that are a little too large for Joy-Cons and kind of like scoot around on it. Oh no, they're the perfect size for this. This is making the thumb problem even worse. Hey, it's got a gyroscope. How good's the gyro? We could maybe have that hard carry the entire thing. It is not good. Let's jump back to the sticks for a moment and show you guys something wrong with the sticks. This is going to be the stick profile of this controller, the 8-bit do, the SN30 Pro Plus. And it's about what you'd expect. Normal stick response and all that, right? Here's PlayStation. It's fine. Here is the Hori pad. It's a square. It's a square response. Why am I mentioning the sticks again? Never in my life have I seen a gyro controller with a square gyro response. Look at this gyro.
Oh, is that not you? Is it? Oh, yeah, it's kind of stepping, isn't it?
Yeah. When I'm doing the diagonals, it steps. Left and right, it's fine.
That's
wanna-
interesting.
Yeah, you want to know why? You're not going to believe this. Let's talk about the joystick for a moment. Shall we talk about the joystick? Let's talk about the joystick. It's square.
Yikes.
And you know what else is square?
The gyro?
Check it out. Works fine, right? Diagonals? Steppy as fuck. But
What in the
if
world? How did
so
they do
if I want to do this, it's like steppy. But if I want to actually look up there, it's like whoop whoop.
What the fuck?
Now, the other controllers, they don't do that. This one, for some reason, is not wanting to work for Left 4 Dead 2, so we'll compare it, finally, to the original Steam controller.
What's up?
No, this is a lot better. It absolutely annihilates this. And the thing that it's supposed to be replacing for me, the DualShock 4, Sony does have gyro. They're not known for having the best gyro. The Nintendo Switch kind of dominates that. Makes sense. They've had practice since the Wii U. It's not the best. Oh, it's so much better than this. So what I'm sitting here at currently is, let's compare it not even to the Steam controller, because it's no contest, not even worth comparing it. It doesn't have a lot of the features that it has. It doesn't even have a rumble. Let's just compare it to the DualShock 4. They have a feature that you're probably never going to use. The D-pad is better on the DualShock 4. The face buttons are better on the DualShock 4. Like I said, the sticks are more comfortable and they're better, and I can't believe I'm saying that with how much they drift, but at least they stay in their freaking radius. The shoulder buttons? Oh yeah. They're still membrane on this, but you could rapid fire that. This is a little squishy. The analog triggers, do I even need to say it? The gyroscope's better. This has more buttons, and it has better compatibility with Steam. That is the one thing we can give this. But it is actually trying to hurt me. And I'm not even really talking about too much of the rumble, because I kind of don't care. If the rumble's too strong, like it is in this, it can actually make your gyro aim jitter, which can be a problem. Not having it's not a deal breaker, but here's the weird thing. Inside this controller, it has cutouts for rumble motors. And there's nowhere on the board for that to actually connect to. Almost like this shell was taken from another project, which I can't even imagine what that would be. It's also odd that it looks like it was originally going to have a headphone jack that is completely sealed. And yes, inside the controller, there's nothing in there too. It's hard to say that it's one of the worst controllers I've ever owned, because as a generic controller, I mean, it does the thing, but like, it actively hurts to use it, and everything just feels okay instead of good. The gyro being their primary focus and being that bad is kind of unforgivable though, because even this absolute piece of trash with its squeaking stick, its sandpaper buttons, I did a whole review on this if you guys want to see this one, even this has a far better gyroscope than that. Actually, this one was surprisingly good. But no, kind of every controller I own that has a gyroscope does it better than this one, because this one is like almost unusable. It's slightly better than aiming with just a stick, but not by much. And if these sticks were better, that might not even be an issue. I'm willing to bet that something as old as like the GameCube could probably match your aim accuracy with its analog sticks versus this controller's gyro. And at that point, why even bother? This I kept. It's an interesting curiosity and a fascination. This I'm returning. And that's a shame, because what this represents would have been so important. Putting our foot down and being like, fine, if Xbox, if Microsoft isn't going to adopt gyro, and we don't have a good way to have that on PC, then third-party companies will partner with Valve and make it happen. That would be great. This thing existing is important, and that's why I wanted to own this. But it's so unusable compared to everything else. I just can't, because it's just going to sit there. It would be a conversation piece. That's a very short conversation. Like, what is that thing? Oh, that's a Steam controller, officially licensed by Hori. I didn't know they did that. Is it any good? No. Oh. The end. Besides, I got a better conversation piece right here.